rushed through the importation of the Canadian gray wolves and has set them loose in our state despite numerous protests and questions about the legality and dysfunctional and chaotic approach to prioritizing predators over people. CPW began releasing gray wolves in the state without notifying landowners, livestock producers, and other reasonably concerned constituents of the location of the releases. 5 of the released wolves came from packs with a known history of chronic livestock depredation. This misguided approach of importing foreign predators has received pushback from tribes, residents, energy operators, and most importantly, our farmers and ranchers. Delisting the gray wolf from the federal endangered species list will remove the current prohibitions and restrictions on land use activities, whether on public lands or private lands. DSA restrictions prohibit ranchers and pet owners from protecting their livestock and pets as ranchers who defend their sheep or cattle from wolves face potential prosecution. Madam Chair, I'd like to enter into the record a letter from the American Farm Bureau supporting the Pet and Livestock Protection Act into the record.
Without objection.
And Madam Chair, I'd also like to enter into the record a letter from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and Public Lands Council in support of the Pet and Livestock Protection Act into the record as well.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, wolves don't see, they aren't aware of, they don't obey arbitrary lines. They don't know what state lines are, and they don't know the difference between state, federal, tribal, and private land. It's in their nature to travel great distances in pursuit of their prey, whether it's deer, elk, sheep, cattle, or even our pets. Last week, one of the Canadian wolves imported by CPW traveled from western Colorado up to northern Wyoming, Madam Chair, and killed 5 sheep. Now, these wolves were introduced west of the Continental Divide, but east of the Continental Divide last year, a gray wolf from the Great Lakes region was found over 1,000 miles away in Elbert County, Colorado, in my district, not even wolves that were brought in by Colorado. Earlier this month, one of the Canadian wolves attacked and killed a working cattle dog in Jackson County, Colorado. Unfortunately, there are several stories just like this, and since 2021, 50 pets and livestock have been gruesomely attacked and killed by gray wolves. Madam Chair, I'd also like to submit CPW's wolf depredation list, which is quite extensive, into the record.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colorado's agricultural producers have lost $580,000 in just 1 year from wolves already introduced. We should listen to our farmers and ranchers, trust the science, and finally delist the gray wolf. Gray wolves were first listed under the Endangered Species Act in 1967. That's 58 years ago, and they are fully recovered. Take the win. Let's celebrate the Endangered Species Act. Let's take the win. Since then, though, delisting the gray wolf has been supported by Obama, President Trump, and the Biden administrations. In November of 2020, scientists and nonpartisan career employees at the Department of the Interior once again found that the gray wolves were fully recovered and once again issued a rule that returned management of gray wolf populations to the state and tribal wildlife agencies. And unfortunately, frivolous litigation got us back to where we are again. The science is crystal clear on this issue. Gray wolves should no longer be on the endangered species list. Let's stop the back and forth, and I look forward to today's discussion on our bill. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield.
Thank you. I now recognize Congresswoman Dingell for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for considering my important legislation today. And I want to thank my friends, Representative Huizenga and Wahlberg, for their bipartisan support. Yep, we have a bipartisan bill today. The Great Lakes states and tribes, along with Fish and Wildlife Service, annually stock millions of salmon and trout to restore native fish populations, diversify sport fisheries, and control invasive forage fishes within the Great Lakes. However, little is known about how well these fish survive, contribute to the fisheries, and reproduce in the wild. This is where the mass marking bill comes into play. Mass marking is the practice of tagging large numbers of hatchery-raised fish so we can easily distinguish them from the wild fish population. The planned method within the Great Lakes is to clip the adipose fin, the small fin on the dorsal side near the tail, combined with a coated wire tag, or CWT. A CWT is 1.1 millimeter long stainless steel wire marked with serial numbers denoting a specific group of fish. This tag can be extracted after recapture, which will provide biologists with key population characteristics, such as survival, movement, contribution to fisheries, growth, and levels of natural reproduction. This legislation would mark all hatchery-produced fish within the Great Lakes. Currently, we only tag around 9 to 11 million of the 21 million fish stocked in the Great Lakes each year. Marking all hatchery fish will improve data collection, enable better analysis of the health of wild fish stocks. It will provide valuable insights to help develop a science-based collaborative fishery management program. The legislation also ensures that the collected data will be shared with all relevant fishery management agencies. We've seen the effectiveness of these types of programs in the Pacific Northwest for salmon and steelhead management. With the Great Lakes fishing economy valued at $7 billion, it is time we invest in this proven data-driven approach that would significantly enhance the sustainability and effectiveness of hatchery operations and fisheries management. I again want to thank the chair for considering this important legislation today, and I encourage all of my colleagues to support its final passage. With that, I yield back, Madam Chair.
I now recognize Congresswoman Green for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning. I'd like to thank Chairman Westerman and Chairwoman Hageman for considering my bill at the subcommittee hearing today to codify President Trump's executive order. The Gulf of America Act would rename the body of water formerly known as the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. The Secretary of Interior, acting through the chairman of the U.S. Board of Geographic Names, would oversee the implementation of the renaming. On his first day back in office, President Trump signed Executive Order 14172 entitled Restoring Names That Honor American Greatness. Section 1 of the executive order lays out the purpose and policy of the directive, stating, "It is in the national interest to promote the extraordinary heritage of our nation and ensure future generations of American citizens celebrate the legacy of our American heroes. The renaming of our national treasures, including breathtaking natural wonders and historic works of art, should honor the contributions of visionary and patriotic Americans in our nation's rich past." Section 4 of the order states that the Gulf of America has long been an integral asset to our nation and has remained an indelible part of America. First of all, our great military and Coast Guard patrol and defend the waters of the Gulf of America. They protect our nation at the Gulf from human and drug trafficking coming from Mexico and other countries. It is only fitting that the Gulf therefore be named after America. The Gulf was a crucial artery for America's early trade and global commerce and remains so today. It is the largest Gulf in the world, and the U.S. coastline along the Gulf spans over 1,700 miles and contains about 160 million acres. The Gulf's natural resources and wildlife are an essential part of America's economy. It is one of the largest oil and gas regions in the world, providing about 14% of our nation's crude oil production and an abundance of natural gas. The resources found in the Gulf have driven innovative technologies that have allowed our nation to reach some of the deepest and richest oil reserves in the world. The Gulf is also home to many fisheries teeming with snapper, shrimp, grouper, stone crab, and other species. And it is recognized as one of the most productive fisheries in the world, with the second largest volume of commercial fishing landings by region in the nation. contributing millions of dollars to local American economies. The Gulf is also a vital region for the multi-billion-dollar American maritime industry, containing some of the largest ports in the world, including in Houston, New Orleans, and Mobile. Millions of Americans visit the Gulf each year with their families and take part in all the recreation it has to offer. Given all these contributions from the Gulf to our nation and from our nation to the Gulf, it is clear that the states which border the Gulf, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama.
Answer to having a better offense is to stop punting on first down because we keep firing the offensive coordinator. But we will continue that conversation, I'm sure, into the future. We've had it so many times here in this committee, and we have just, picked through every aspect of why, from our perspective, you need good science, you need good personnel and wildlife managers, you need adequate budgets and staffing for the ESA to work. And we will keep making those points. But certainly, a bill to make the ESA weaker is not the answer and is nothing new. We've just seen it so many times before. What is new, and I'm in my 13th year in Congress, I've never seen anything even remotely like the gentlelady from Georgia's bill to curry favor with Donald Trump by affirming his swaggering ignorance in trying to rename the Gulf of Mexico. This is just remarkable new stuff in this committee, just bootlicking sycophancy of the highest order. And the only point of this bill, and everybody knows it, is just to kiss up to Donald Trump. All of you know that this is not a serious bill. Surely many of you are embarrassed by this naked tribute to the cult leader. But here we are. We're actually dedicating committee time to this joke of a bill. And of all of the unserious things that have been said about this deeply unserious bill, perhaps the biggest joke of all is the suggestion that it has something to do with national security. The sponsor of the bill mentioned national security. One of the witnesses talked about this as if somehow kissing up to Donald Trump and renaming the Gulf of Mexico will make us safer? I mean, come on. Anyone who wants to be taken seriously about national security should be talking about one thing and one thing only today. Reporting from The Atlantic yesterday revealed that senior Trump administration officials, including the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Director of National Intelligence, U.S. National Security Advisor, and White House Chief of Staff, debated and coordinated an airstrike on a foreign adversary in the Middle East using the messaging app Signal. The conversation, which included an exchange of classified information over a non-secure platform on non-secure devices, was complete with craven political justification for the strike, middle school-style celebration of an attack that actually killed people, and yes, even emojis. And the reason we know all this is they accidentally included the editor of The Atlantic in the text chain. Unfortunately, unlike the Gulf of America legislation before us, this is not a joke. What it is a breathtaking breach of national security and public trust that makes Americans less safe and makes our country the laughingstock of the world. Imagine if instead of fat-fingering the Signal handle of a reporter, one of these clowns had looped in a less responsible journalist, or a reporter with Putin's RT, or maybe a defense or an intelligence contact with opposing views of the conflict in Yemen, maybe someone motivated to leak it. Kevin Carroll, a national security lawyer and former CIA officer, said it best in the Washington Post yesterday evening. If these people were junior uniformed personnel, they would be court-martialed. So where's the accountability? Where's the outrage from my friends across the aisle? I heard Speaker Johnson call this a mistake, just sort of shrug it off and say that the administration would learn from it. This is not a mistake. This is a fireable offense. The president put these incompetent people in position to safeguard our country's sensitive defense and security information, and instead they're treating it like they're in some kind of a March Madness chat group with their fraternity brothers. Anyone who wants to be taken seriously on national security should be focused on this today. Not trying to break the Endangered Species Act or kill wolves or rename bodies of water to appease a petulant president. I yield back.
The chair now recognizes Mr. LaMalfa for 5 minutes of questioning on the topic at hand.
The topic at hand, that's not bashing Trump over every little thing, was it? Okay.
Is a good number, especially when we're seeing just the amount of depredation cases taking place, the amount of harm to our pets, to our livestock, to our wildlife. And, you know, there's been a lot of attacks on Elon Musk and the federal agencies and folks no longer being employed because of Doge efforts or whatever that may be by President Trump's requests. Don't you think this is a great time to get the federal government out of the way and return management back to the states and local tribes?
No, I think we need the expertise of these federal biologists.
So the federal government is just the end-all, be-all. We have the federal government, and they're smarter than any state management program, any tribal management program.
The best conservation is with the collaboration between federal and state.
Do these biologists benefit from being in frivolous lawsuits and held up in court rather than being in the lab and creating studies?
You know, most biologists want to be out in the field.
Yes, they do, but there are frivolous lawsuits that prevent them from that. And I haven't heard any of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle complaining about that aspect of it, just that there may be some reduction in these employees.
Is there a question?
Well, you are saying, it's not really a question, you're saying that they want to be in the field.
Yes, the federal-
but there are these frivolous lawsuits that keep them tied up. And
I don't know if they're frivolous or not. So as a
would say
federal
that they are.
biologist, you...
Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to move on to Dr. Roberts here. Do you believe that it's time to delist the gray wolf from the Endangered Species Act?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I think the science is clear on that.
And with this frivolous litigation, like the Defenders of Wildlife lawsuit, does that has it distorted the original intent of the Endangered Species Act?
Yes, I think so. The Endangered Species Act is intended to protect animals at immediate risk of extinction. And those lawsuits that you reference, if you look at those, they're primarily on procedural issues, not the issue of whether the number of animals that are on the landscape.
Yes, yeah. When the ESA is abused, I think that the intent of the act is certainly distorted as well. And Dr. Roberts, how does keeping the wolves listed harm, if it does, the conservation efforts?
Well, I think it is discouraging to states and to individuals to engage in species recovery, to be involved in working with species at peril if there's no end in sight.
And just with our last 30 seconds, Dr. Roberts, how successful have state and tribal management been at helping restore the gray wolf populations to the full recovery levels?
Well, like my colleague mentions, collaboration between the state and federal government is important, and working with the state government was an important aspect that led to the recovery of the gray wolf.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our witnesses. Madam Chair, I yield.
I call on Ms. Rivas for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you for recognizing me. I consider myself a serious legislator who was elected to serve my constituents and
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. You know, I heard some of our witnesses say that business requires certainty and predictability. We've gotten anything but that in the last 64 days with tariffs on and off, mass firings, deportations, chaos, division, all slowly wrecking our economy. Unemployment is rising, growth is slowing, the stock market is dropping, and even President Trump admitted that we could be headed for a recession. So I'm not sure how many people realize this, but natural resources are absolutely critical for Florida's economy. We have a huge tourism, ecotourism industry, huge fisheries, national parks, all this being utilized to help out. And I know many of your constituents get to enjoy coming to Florida, and we welcome them. It's America's playground. which is why President Trump's cuts to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, otherwise known as NOAA, is hitting us very hard. A 10% cut in personnel, over 1,000 employees fired, another 1,000 from the national parks, by the way. Our state gets just devastated by hurricanes. This is going to affect everything from preparedness for floods to hurricanes to other natural disasters, our readiness, our response. And I could tell you, after a hurricane hits, it takes sometimes weeks to months for folks to be able to recover, sometimes years. It affects lives and livelihoods. Central Florida farmers are still recovering from Hurricanes Helene and Milton, along with businesses along the Gulf of Mexico, like in St. Pete, where you have a lot of these small mom and pop hotels that are still getting sand out of their first floors and trying to recover and rebuild. Even grants to improve weather forecasts have been cut, which also hurts, again, readiness, response. The more time we have, the better we can protect small businesses across Florida. Also, fisheries are absolutely critical for our state, both recreational and commercial. Everybody is pretty familiar with grouper or red snapper, both favorites of mine and many others. NOAA helps manage fisheries. NOAA helps navigation information for ships and marine sanctuaries. Huge for fishing, huge for tourism in Florida. And so when you have cuts ordered without guidance on where to cut, nothing's efficient about that. Most of these folks are probationary employees. The only thing they have going for them of why they got selected is because they've been there for 3 years or less. Some of them could be management, they could be experts, or they could be the new guy on the block. And so you literally, at random by how they came in, cut these folks, and then it makes it even less efficient than it was before. This is the Committee of Jurisdiction. We should be having hearings on this. I don't see anybody from NOAA here, from the national parks. I, in fact, haven't seen anybody yet invited from those agencies, and this is going to affect our biggest industries in Florida, especially tourism. You know, Dr. Kariva, thank you for being here. Environmental tourism, huge in Florida. You know how many people go to our beaches? They go out on boats and recreational fishing. They go to see the manatees, get to enjoy the Everglades and so many other areas like the Kissimmee Chain of Lakes in my district. How are these NOAA cuts affecting tourism both in your area and across the nation?
Well, in our area, NOAA is very much involved in recovering the kelp ecosystem, which is our productive, the West Coast productive ecosystem. And these cuts will hurt the efforts to restore kelp. And kelp is incredibly economically valuable. It seems like it's just a plant, but per acre of kelp generates in fisheries income alone, just in fisheries income alone, between $5,000 and $20,000 per acre each year if you have an intact kelp. And NOAA is the science agency and a support agency that's involved in rebuilding that whole kelp ecosystem, which is everything from otters to abalone and so on.
And people spend a lot of money to be able to recreational fish or get to see those otters or scuba dive. What have you been seeing lately as a result of this?
Well, I mean, even that, I mean, just think about the fact that we had a lot of talk about the Endangered Species Act. We recovered whales, and now just in California alone, it's a $20 million a year industry to just go out whale watching. That's courtesy of the Endangered Species Act, to be able to go out whale watching. So it's going to be really important to the whole coastal economy to restore this kelp.
And we welcome all your constituents out to Florida to enjoy, and in a bipartisan fashion. I know Congressman Webster's on this committee. This is absolutely critical that we protect NOAA and we protect both our fisheries and tourism. It's huge business in our state. And I yield back.
The chair now recognizes Mr. Ezell for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for all being here today. For far too long, the Endangered Species Act, or ESA,